Now, not all scary moments in horror films are necessarily big, loud, grandstanding ones. Sometimes they're a little more subtle than that. Filmmakers often creatively use all of their tools in their box to do something which slightly creeps up on viewers instead. There's a great art to creating terrifying subtleties you surely didn't pick up on until you watch the movie a second, third, or even fourth time. So with that in mind, I'm Adam, this is What Culture Horror, and here are 10 scariest horror movie moments you didn't notice straight away. Number 10. Michael Myers driving past Loomis, Halloween 1978. Halloween's Michael Myers may resemble a spectral entity, but as the original movie makes clear early on, the guy still needs to commandeer a car to get to places, namely escaping the sanitarium where he's confined and getting back to his hometown of Haddonfield. This isn't the only time we see Michael driving in the movie though, and in fact, one such instance is hidden rather eerily in plain sight. When Dr. Loomis is talking to Sheriff Brackett roughly 33 minutes into the movie, keep your eyes on the upper left side of the screen. Now who do we see driving by? Michael Myers driving the very same car and even sporting his signature white William Shatner mask. While the idea of Michael driving around in broad daylight with that terrifying mask on is admittedly quite funny, it's also creepy as hell that he's just cruising around town while the people of Haddonfield, including Loomis, are seemingly none the wiser. Number 9. The early killer reveal, Deep Red. Brace yourself because this one's freaking terrifying. Deep Red kicks off with the brutal murder of psychic medium Helga Ullman, as is noticed by protagonist Marcus while passing by her home. An alarmed Marcus rushes into her apartment, and as he walks through the hallway, keep your eyes fixed on the left-hand side of the screen just as he passes a painting. Quickly pause the movie and you'll spot what's clearly a human face staring back at you, as we later learn to be the film's killer, Marta. Unlike most movies on this list, however, Deep Red actually draws attention to this at the very end of the movie, as Marcus realizes that the painting he thought he saw when he originally rushed into the apartment was in fact Marta staring at him in a reflection. And while this could have felt like a cheap twist if it wasn't possible for audiences to spot it the first time around, the fact that Argento indeed slyly revealed the killer's identity just 20 minutes into the movie is yet another directing masterstroke in a career full of them. Number 8. Tessas ominous warning, Barbarian. Barbarian is a stunning mood exercise from its very first shot, an extremely uneasy piece of work long before we even know what's going on in the rental house where protagonist Tess is staying. But filmmaker Zach Cregger leaves a deeply creepy hint hidden in plain sight in one of the film's establishing scenes. The morning after Tess spends her first night at the house, she goes outside and the camera surveys the dilapidated graffiti-covered homes across the street. It all seems pretty expected of this clearly run-down Detroit neighborhood, except if you look closer at the house diagonal to Tess's eye line, the door has the words "Death from Below" sprayed on it. This is telling because, of course, it turns out that the basement of the house Tess is staying in contains a hidden tunnel where a mutated, murderous woman is secretly residing. Cregger quite cleverly plays on our expectations that a phrase like "death from below" doesn't seem out of place in such a neglected neighborhood, but as it turns out, he was slyly nudging us in the right direction of the plot. Number 7. The stabbed gremlin is still alive, Gremlins. One of the most memorable scenes from the original Gremlins sees Billy's mother Lynn unleash her secret inner badass when she dismantles 3 of the gremlins, making a mess in her kitchen. The first one gets turned into mulch when Lynn activates the blender it's sitting in, the second is seemingly killed when she stabs it 3 times, and the third is explosively pulped when she traps it in a microwave and turns it on. In all the excitement, however, it's easy to miss a detail that's been little discussed in the 4 decades since the film's release. One of the gremlins is actually still alive the last time we see them. After the microwave explodes the third gremlin, keep your eyes fixed on the kitchen worktop, where the stabbed gremlin is shown still moving and clutching at the knife stabbed in its chest. While it's absolutely possible that said gremlin dies of their wounds shortly thereafter, there's no guarantee of that, and so Lynn wasn't quite so safe when she probably thought she was. And above all else, props to the animatronics team who put in so much effort into the wounded gremlin's subtle movements, only for them to be missed by a solid 99.7% of viewers. Number 6. La Femme walks through the house inside. 2007's Horror Inside is a quite literally gut-wrenching piece of work centered around a pregnant woman, Sarah, who finds herself fighting off a mysterious home invader with sinister designs on her unborn child. Following her initial encounter with said woman, Sarah calls the police, who promptly show up to sweep the house and resolve the matter. But while Sarah is being interviewed by one of the officers on her sofa, look in the top left corner and you'll see a blood-chilling sight: the woman silently re-entering the house. It's easy to miss given the scene's relatively low-key lighting and how our focus is trained on Sarah and the police officer at the center of the frame, but it's certainly something you might spot on repeat viewings. It's all the more unnerving when you consider that the woman attacks Sarah in her bed just a few scenes later, having so daringly re-entered the property while the police were still doing their rounds. The stone's on this woman. And while I've got you here, why don't you answer one question for me in the comments down below? What is one horror movie moment where you spotted something in the background and you were like, aha, gotcha? Please do let us know down below, and while you're there, make sure you give us a like and a subscribe. I'm looking forward to checking your answers out. Alright, now back to the list. Number 5. The Haunted Mirror, The Mothman Prophecies. Confirming that horror filmmakers sure do love using mirrors to thoroughly screw with the audience, we have the brilliantly atmospheric The Mothman Prophecies. At roughly the 78-minute mark, protagonist John Klein is on the phone in his home while standing in front of a door with a mirror on it. As John talks, pay attention to the reflection in the mirror. It's subtly yet noticeably out of sync with his actual movements for a few seconds as he turns his head. There's no way that this can be a mistake. It's presumably a very intentional visual effect designed to unnerve anyone who notices it. And it doesn't end there. When John angrily ends the phone conversation, he slams the door, at which point a spectral figure, perhaps the Mothman or the mysterious Indrid Cold, can be seen in the reflection for a few frames. It's impressively sly stuff, and insanely creepy if you manage to catch any of it on repeat viewing. Number 4. Teddy's daughter in the Dachau flashback, Shutter Island. Throughout Martin Scorsese's Shutter Island, protagonist Teddy Daniels experiences flashbacks to his traumatic time as a US Army soldier during the liberation of the Dachau concentration camp. One particularly haunting image is the reoccurring visual of the piles of frozen bodies on the ground. But if you look closely at one of the corpses during the first flashback, it's actually Teddy's own deceased daughter. The girl is wearing the very same distinctive red dress and red shoes that Teddy's daughter is later shown wearing when she died, and it is indeed the same actress playing the part. The second flashback more overtly nods towards this being Teddy's daughter, but the first time we see her, we likely assume she's another of Dachau's many victims and don't give it much of a second thought. It's only a little later in the film that we actually see what happened to Teddy's family, but by hiding his daughter in plain sight during the first Dachau flashback, Scorsese slyly hints that Teddy's memories aren't reliable, teeing up the eventual twist that he isn't who he believes himself to be. Number 3. The Dark Spirit Wanders Around, Veronica. Firstly, if you haven't seen 2017's terrific Spanish horror flick Veronica yet, get on it as soon as possible. It's a brilliantly moody film about the titular young woman who is pursued by a dark spirit after using a Ouija board. And while the spirit makes numerous appearances throughout the movie, there's an absolutely terrifying one you probably didn't pick up on the first time around. Midway through the film, when Veronica is doing the dishes in her apartment, her TV suddenly turns itself on, and an understandably creeped out Veronica walks over to investigate. But just as she does, fix your gaze on the doorway next to her, where the dark spirit can be barely seen walking through the hall, its shadowy figure cleverly blending into the scene's general darkness. Nothing in the scene attempts to draw your attention to this. There's no loud tension chord, nor does the camera focus on the hallway at all. But it's there alright, and it's spooky as hell. Number 2. The Xenomorph hanging out in Ripley's shuttle, Alien. The end of Ridley Scott's Alien is so brilliantly tense that you couldn't be blamed for missing this one. The finale sees Ripley scuttle the Nostromo and flee in an escaped shuttle, but just as she prepares to enter stasis, she realizes that the Xenomorph has stored aboard. We see the Xenomorph emerge from the side of the shuttle, having managed to blend in with the various pipes and machinery there. But Scott didn't merely place the Xenomorph among the pipes for a single shot. If you go back to the prior glimpses of Ripley prepping for stasis, the Xenomorph's head can indeed be seen subtly nestled there. It's easier to spot if you watch the scene in slow motion and wait for the shuttle's emergency lighting to briefly flash on, giving you a brief window of time to get a closer look at the alien just quietly hanging out. Now you've got to respect the effort for a shot that the overwhelming majority of people would never even catch. Number 1. Rose's last chance, Smile. Smile is one of those pleasantly surprising horror films of the last few years, centered around therapist Rose as she finds herself terrorized by an entity which feeds on her unresolved childhood trauma, namely witnessing her mother's overdose death. At the end of the second act, the film itself seems to be pointing out that Rose is headed on a path to destruction, given that when she arrives home, a piece of mail has the words "Last Chance" written on it. Seconds later, Rose receives a call from her therapist, Dr. Madeline Northcott, who has been trying to get Rose to open up about her trauma for years. Upon seeing who is calling, however, Rose doesn't answer the phone, an act which sets Rose on a fateful course for the rest of the movie, ending with her death at the entity's hands. And so, this moment was indeed Rose's last chance to preemptively confront her past before it would end up consuming her. Evidently, the world of the movie was even telling her this. How creepy indeed.